He's news editor at the Australian Times. And Paul, I mean, did Kevin Rudd ever get a honeymoon? And if he did, is the honeymoon truly over now?
Well, I think Kevin Rudd definitely did get a honeymoon the first time around, but I'm not sure if it's so much of a honeymoon the second time around. And now, obviously, he took over from Julia Gillard, again regaining the title of Prime Minister about a month ago. He did have a short honeymoon period. The polls bumped up to about 45–50% for Kevin, but that's not saying much considering that Julia Gillard was at record lows of under 30%. So it was a bump, but it still might not be enough to take the lead.
And in terms of when he should have called an election, are there some disagreements over perhaps he should have done it straight away after that dramatic ousting of Julia Gillard?
Absolutely. There was talk of a snap election being called, which probably would have worked in Kevin's favour a lot better. The funny thing is that he called this election over the weekend for the 7th of September. The polling that came out this morning, the most recent polling, shows that he's had a 4% drop in popularity ratings since the last polls came out. So possibly a sign that the worst is still to come for Kev.
Interestingly, the polls say that Labour's not doing that well, but there are more voters that would prefer him as Prime Minister than Tony Abbott.
Yeah, there's it's a bit of a strange position that the Australian people find themselves in. Kevin Rudd is an extremely popular person. In fact, he's been accused of turning Australian politics into presidential-style politics, where the leader, takes precedence. However, the people who work with Kevin Rudd have a very different story to tell. They say there was a quote from a former Labor Party national president that said, "If you like Kevin Rudd, don't meet him because you're going to be very disappointed." They don't like to work with him, but the Australian public actually really like him as a person.
So now the election campaign is in full swing. We've got this promises bonanza now happening. Both leaders promising all these things, offering money, ending of carbon taxes, and the rest.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really an election that's being fought on two fronts. The economy, obviously, is going to be a big issue. The figures aren't stacking up. There's a report that came out today that says there's a $70 billion black hole in the costings of the coalition's policies, the opposition party's policies, which needs to be addressed. The other issue that it will be fought on is more social issues. Asylum seekers have become a major issue in the last few weeks with Kevin Rudd's new hardline approach towards the issue. So it will remain to be seen exactly what the parties will focus on going into the election, but it will be interesting to find out.
We've all been captivated by the Australian political scene over the last few weeks, but are Australians a little bit fatigued? Because it does seem to have been going on so intensely for so long.
It's been one of the longest election campaigns, I think possibly the longest election campaign in world history. Julia Gillard, Kevin Rudd's predecessor, called an election date of September 14 earlier in the year, I think around January. So really this election campaign's been going on for upwards of 8 months already, even though that the official campaign's only just started. So we do have a little bit of election fatigue. We've gone through every single issue and almost discussed it to death. So I think we're just ready to see what happens, and it'll be very interesting.
Who could blame you for being fatigued 8 months long of an election campaign? Thanks very much indeed, Paul Bleakley. Now here in the UK, more
who's news editor for the Australian Times, a news website based in London. Thanks for coming in. I just wonder what Australians are making of this. I mean, we think of Rupert Murdoch as being an Australian, but that's not his official nationality now, is it?
No, well, that's right. I mean, Rupert Murdoch hasn't had a residency in Australia for quite some time now. He's obviously been focused more on his American and British enterprises. Rupert Murdoch is always going to be a looming figure. He's always one of the most well-known Australians in the world right now, probably ever. So what Rupert Murdoch says does have a lot of weight. When it comes to the general public, though, I don't think that they really would put a lot of standing in what Rupert would say. That being said, Australia isn't used to this kind of intervention from a media magnate, so to speak. It reminds me a lot of in 1997 when Rupert Murdoch came out in favour of Tony Blair in the UK. This isn't something that typically happens in the Australian market. Newspapers, media outlets don't typically come out in favour of a political candidate.
It seems very British, though, looking at it over here, in terms of, and even using the sort of Second World War analogy and comparing politicians to hapless characters. I mean, that's something that the British tabloids have been doing for a long time.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and that's why it really brings back a lot of those memories of 1997 and Tony Blair and Murdoch's relationship. Australian newspapers and the media, generally speaking, are a lot more objective than you might find in the British tabloid press. They don't really stand for a lot of endorsing candidates or smear campaigns, I suppose you would say. But in this instance, it seems like we've seen a bit of a turnaround, and Murdoch is obviously pushing that.
I think he's got 70% of the newspaper ownership in Australia. How much of a threat does this broadband network really pose to Foxtel?
I think it poses a significant threat. I mean, you can see across the world these days, people are using broadband more and more. Netflix, Hulu, stuff like that to find their entertainment and even their news sources. Print media is a dying industry in Australia and across the world due to the power of the internet. So it does pose a significant threat to Rupert Murdoch, and there has been that suggestion that is the reason why Murdoch has come out so hard in favour of the coalition plan.
I mean, his argument is that it's just prohibitively expensive. What do we think Tony Abbott's position is on this? I mean, is he going to sort of rein in a little bit on getting this network out?
Well, look, Tony Abbott's position on the National Broadband Network is to provide a network that he says works almost as well, or just as well, for a cheaper price and quicker than Kevin Rudd's plan would do. That network has been proven by experts in the industry to be significantly slower. It takes high-speed cabling to nodes rather than directly into the home, and so it would probably be in Rupert Murdoch's best interests for a slower national broadband network than what Kevin Rudd is suggesting.
And just looking at the reaction in Australia today to that headline, I mean, are people genuinely shocked, or is this just Aussie knockabout humour?
I think it's a bit of both, really. I don't think that people are offended. I wouldn't say people are offended by the front page, but I would say that they are a bit shocked that the papers have come out so firmly in favour of one party over the other. We're not used to this, as I said. We're not used to this type of media getting involved in endorsing candidates. So it is something strange for us in our system.
All right, okay. Paul, thanks very much indeed for coming in to talk to us. Now, in other news, the Syrian government has flatly denied reports that President Bashar al-Assad's motorcade was attacked on its way to a mosque earlier today. State TV